Good afternoon to you all. Thank you for coming to be with us today as we remember and celebrate the life of Dr. Vaidhees Pasupati. My Periyappa lived a long and happy life of 86 years and touched a lot of hearts, as you can see around us today. We very much appreciate your presence here today. I shall hand the podium over to the grandchildren now.
We are 8 of the 10 grandkids of Rasa, Pata and Pati. On behalf of our family, we'd each like to share with you stories and memories of our grandfather. My Pata was an amazing man who I had the extraordinary privilege to learn from, almost as if by osmosis, because it was more than what he said, but actually what he did. He taught me about sacrifice, which is leaving your home in Sri Lanka to start from scratch on the other side of the world. And by leaving Sri Lanka in the 70s, he set up a world of opportunities and choices for his children and for his grandchildren. Even the one for me to go back to Sri Lanka exactly 40 years later. He taught me ingenuity. When we lived in Sydney about 10 years ago, we went on a little overseas holiday whilst Pata and Pati stayed at home. One day, as Pati was taking the clothes from the line and Pata was busy in the garden, the door slammed shut and locked them out. With no neighbours around, no mobile phones, Pata and Pati were in a bit of a bind. Cool, calm and collected, Pata planned his great escape back into the house. Before Pata, there was a little hobbit-sized door through which took him underneath the house. So he jimmied the lock, crept through into the darkness, emerged into the garage, looked at this huge array of tools before him, took out his tools, went and managed to unhinge the door between the garage and the house. Only he could do that. He effectively broke into our house. He taught me patience and literature all in one. As I would bound home from primary school, I would quite literally jump into Pata's lap and get him to read me a book. I remember Pati and Amma would cringe thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to break my poor grandfather. But only Pata and I knew that he could handle 1,000 more of me jumping onto him. He could always handle that. And in my heart, he'll be almost invincible. He taught me intelligence can be quiet and humble and not loud and boastful. The only reason why I think all of us sat and watched Sale of the Century or Who Wants to Be a Millionaire with him was just to watch him get all those questions right. Pata, you taught me that nothing was impossible. It just might take another walk around the block or a different tool or a jostle of the Zimmer frame or a little smile or just a quiet word. Because of you, I have the courage to want more, the patience to go after it, and the knowledge to appreciate and treasure it. I love you, Pata.
I have had many wonderful memories of Pata. He has always been there for me from the time I was born. Pata was always so generous and kind to me every single day. After school, I would walk down to Pati and Pata's house and meet Pata halfway up John Raymer Place. He would always meet me there with a big smile on his face, and we would talk about our day on the way back to his house. Every time I go to Pata and Pati's house, Pater would be very generous and treat my brother and me to a chocolate bar. My pater had a very sweet tooth, so he always had chocolate or ice cream in his house to give us. During the school holidays, pater would always want to go for a walk with my brother and me. One time when we were going for a walk with pater, he wanted to walk up the steep end of John Raymer Place. I was so worried that he might fall, but knowing pater, he would never take the easy way, and we couldn't stop him from going. So he went up the road and came back down. Fortunately, pater was fine. Pater has been a great part of my life, and I will never forget the special memories I had with him.
One of my earliest memories of pater is picking me up from preschool and bringing me back to their house. I would come home afterwards and there would be a glass of milk and biscuits waiting for me. Afterwards, we would go outside into the garden and we'd prune the flowers. He would teach me about the tools and which ones to use. After a while, I would get bored and start playing with the toys outside. Even though we weren't doing things together, knowing that pater was there was enough. When I was older, I would walk down from school and come to pater and Pati's house. They have a big box filled with Lego waiting for me to play with. I would build houses and cars on the coffee table, and when I came back from school the next day, it would still be there. Their house would be filled with toys, but pater never seemed to mind. Pater also liked to be up to date with the latest current affairs. When we often came to his house, the BBC News channel would be on. He would tell us about the countries and the people involved. He would then ask questions related to what we had just watched. There are many words to describe my pater: intelligent, caring and loving. Those are things I will really miss, but keep in my loving memory of pater. Though after his stroke, his speech was very limited, his presence said more than any words.
The last few months have been heartbreaking for me to watch, as pater's body failed him, but his mind never faltered. But I choose to remember pater as the man who always encouraged his grandchildren and never let them feel disappointed or sad. I remember when I was first learning to cook, I completely messed up the recipe for a chocolate pudding, creating a horrible, bitter mess. Pater couldn't stand the thought of me being discouraged, so he sat there and ate the whole thing, not letting me take it away no matter how much I protested. And after that, every time I try a new recipe, he is the first person I get to try it, though I only tell him when I know I have the recipe right. One of my earliest memories are when I was a child, and pater would buy me little electronic kits, as I love to build things, a quality I like to think I inherited from him. Pater would give these to me in the morning, tell me to decide what I wanted to make, and then wait for him to finish work so we could build it together. I remember sitting at their dining table, staring at the clock, and counting down the minutes until he got home. We would sit at the table, working away at it until dinner. Pater would always encourage us no matter what we were interested in, though looking back, I think pater was as excited to use the kits as I was. I will always remember pater as the man who had one hand pushing us forward into whatever interested us, but always kept the other hand waiting to catch us if we ever fell back or felt discouraged. Thank you, pater. I will always love you.
My pater was and will always be the biggest supporter to any of us grandchildren, no matter what anyone else had to say. My pater was and will always be my mentor, who encourages me through the tough times and showers me with praise upon accomplishment. No matter how small or big an achievement, you were that reason for the extra sparkle in pater's eyes. Every year prize givings had me on edge. I didn't want the glory or applause. I longed for the moment I could race home, tell Pater, and see that smile that made you feel like you were the only one that mattered in the moment. He didn't need to say a word. His pride and excitement radiated from him. I still remember coming home last year to find Pater holding a stack of paper, eyes engrossed at every comma. It was a simple letter from my principal, but to Pater it could have been from the Queen. I will never forget that day. I made Pater smile. He was the reason I took every opportunity without hesitation. He'd be there with open arms, waiting to catch me if I ever fell. To watch Prashant, his grandson, compete at the Commonwealth Games, my Pater cut out and read every newspaper article, stayed up till all odd hours of the night, and even got my party to stay up with him, well, sometimes. A laminated copy of my cousin still hangs on the wall, admired by anyone who ventures into our house. We could do no wrong in the eyes of Pater. If Pater could, he would be everywhere and anywhere, cheering us along, our number one personal support crew. Now I am spoilt even more. I have my guardian angel holding my hand tight as I take my next chance. I have my guardian angel right beside me every second of the way. Pater, I will always love you and thank you for everything that you have given me so far, and I can't wait to see what you teach me next.
Pater, I'll always remember you as the one person that I could count on to be there for me. Whenever I needed help or something needed to be fixed, without fail, you were always there. I remember coming home from school one day, upset because I had broken my favourite chain. I thought I needed someone really strong to help me bend it back into place, so I asked my brother Prashant, but he couldn't do it. Pater came along and picked up a pair of pliers and tweezers, and without any struggle, put the chain back into place. Pater, your intellect was by far your greatest strength. I remember another incident when I was on a bike ride with my cousin Romana, and he had gotten his pants tangled up in his bike chain. We thought that the only way we could get home was to have him take off his pants in the middle of the street and walk with the bike alongside him. But before he did, I ran home to get Pater, and within minutes, Pater came to our rescue and managed to save Romana from any shame. Pater, I feel blessed to have had you as my grandfather, and I'm going to miss your cheeky grin and all the times we shared, especially during the holidays, when you and Patty would look after all of us. And I will fondly remember you as a man of patience and pure intellect, and will never forget your perseverance to live life, especially in these last few years. You've been the guiding force behind it all, and I will forever cherish the memories I have of you.
One of Pater's most admirable qualities was his never give up attitude. It didn't matter what anyone else thought. If there was a way, he would find it. In June this year, Shanti and I came to New Zealand just as Pater had been hospitalised. His health would go through ups and downs while we were there and through the months afterwards. But Pater had this amazing perseverance and resilience. Each time he had a low point, he would fight his way back. He had this unwavering determination to not give up. He treasured life here with his family so much that he couldn't imagine any other possibility other than to come back home. As I hear stories and reminisce about Pater, it is this determination that seems to pervade everything he did. For instance, when Nirja Chitti and Suresh Chittappa wanted to install sensor lights on the driveway, the electrician said it couldn't be done. Pater said it could be done, and that it would work, and sure enough, Pater made it work. I remember how you couldn't convince Pater that the weather was not suitable to walk in. Rain, hail or shine, he'd be on his laps around the block, and at a pace we couldn't keep up with. I used to love to see Pater and Party during their annual pilgrimage to Sydney to see the other half of their family. Even though the journey was exhausting, the thrill of seeing everyone was enough to keep him and push him through. Pater, I think your determination was inspired by your love for your family and your love for life. You remind me that every day we shouldn't take a moment for granted, just as you fought for every day that you lived. Your legacy will be for me to appreciate every day as passionately and as wholeheartedly as you did.
Pata embodied the saying, "The past is behind, learn from it. The future is ahead, prepare for it. The present is here, live it." His Parkinson's may have trapped his body, but his mind and his soul were soaring. Although physically he found it difficult to walk, he would have vivid dreams of him running and of much more action. He would awake with a huge smile on his face. His dreams offered him a dimension free of limits. Pata was always able to accept the things he could not change, had the courage to change the things he could, and the wisdom to know the difference. Again, with his Parkinson's, he couldn't change it, but instead of feeling sorry for himself, he would work around it and even direct Sanj in intricate surgery to revive old and rusty remotes. Even leaving Sri Lanka, his always calm and composed character shone through. He accepted the political situation in Sri Lanka for what it was and pragmatically came to the decision to leave. Pata left under the radar in a situation where no one but close family was told. You'd think Pata would be just a little bit stressed and anxious, but no. Pata was late, as usual, for his plane and was even announced on the loudspeaker for the Pasupatis to come to the gate. There was slight concern from the family that he had been intercepted and caught, but Pata, Pati and their children eventually turned up, with Pata not the slightest bit fazed, and they boarded the plane safely and came to New Zealand. Pata's character is an almost divine balance of detachment coupled with love for his family and friends. He entered every situation composed and solution-minded, and his detachment allowed him to see a problem from a whole perspective. His heart always stubbornly gave him courage and strength to fix it. As pragmatic as he was, his romantic side was definitely appreciated by the females in his family. His wife, I'm sure, equally appreciated this, but as my party, I always saw her practical and grounded reactions to it. Amidst the ambience of a dusk-lit French-windowed private hospital room with Nat King Cole playing softly in the background, Pata grabbed Pati's hand in a gesture of impulsive affection. Nive Ramana and my hearts melted, and my Pati's reaction was, "Enna rasa, what is this?" But we knew what it was. Even in those last stages, he remained a warm, loving, and sincere gentleman. Pata is no longer bound by time and space, but I feel his presence with me now more than I ever have before. I know that we all have a guardian angel and that he is always going to be with us. He's no longer confined to his body, but he's here with us even now.
I now call upon Dr. Mahesan Rasanathan, one of his oldest acquaintances here in New Zealand, to say a few words. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have known Vaidhees for almost 40 years. I offer my deepest sympathy and heartfelt condolences to the members of his family. I thank them for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I consider it a great honor. Vaidhees had great qualities of virtue, goodness, compassion, simplicity, and humility. His simplicity and humility greatly impressed me. Above all, he was a family man. Family meant everything to him. My wife's grandmother was treated by him for throat cancer in Sri Lanka. He was so compassionate that my wife's grandmother and other patients used to describe him as a god. This was because he showed great compassion and mercy. There's a Tamil saying, "Nalladeye sei, endrum nalladeye naadu." This means, thou shalt only do good. Thou shalt seek goodness always. Vaidhees was a great example of this saying. He was a great husband, a great father, a great brother, and a fine grandfather. He has ended his life now having fulfilled his duties. As such, let us not despair. In his last days, he really suffered. Let us be happy that his suffering is now over. Let us celebrate his life. The name Pasupati has a deep philosophical meaning. Pasu, that's the soul, is always trying to reach Padi, that's the God. But Pattu and Pasam, attachment and affection, is stopping souls from reaching God. Now Vaidhees has severed his attachment and affection and reached God. Thus, there's no question about it, he is really a Pasupati. Let me end by quoting the words of profound wisdom written by a Tamil saint. Saint Ilango Adigal ends his celebrated epic, Silappadigaram, with a long poem. The poem describes and prescribes the way to a good life. The last two lines of the poem implores the world, or people of the world, as follows. Ulanal barayadu, olluvadu oliyadu, sellum theyattukku uru thunai thedumin. The meaning is, your days are numbered. You cannot avoid death. As such, do enough good to ensure a good future after death. By this, my dear friend, may you rest in peace. May you have eternal bliss in God's feet. Thank you.
The Last Farewell by Trevor Rowe. Dear friends, I go, but do not weep. I've lived my life so full, so deep. Throughout my life, I gave my best. I earned my keep, I've earned my rest. I never tried to be great or grand. I tried to be a helping hand. If I helped in a team, if I helped on my own, I was more than repaid by good friends I have known. And I went the extra mile. I did it with pleasure, it was all worthwhile. If I brightened your path, then let it be a small contribution from my loved ones and me. But mostly I cherished the family I knew, in a bond never ending, so precious, so true. Now sadly I leave you and travel alone through the mystic veil to the great unknown, with such beautiful memories that forever will be the way that I hope you'll remember me.